There is a very specific kind of person. When something hurts them, they do not raise their voice, they do not argue, they do not immediately explain what they feel. They just go quiet. Not in a dramatic way, not to make a point, not to punish anyone. It is quieter than that, subtler, almost invisible if you are not paying attention. One moment they are there, engaged, present, responding like anyone else. And then something shifts. Something small gets said. Maybe it was not even meant to hurt. Maybe the other person did not even notice it, but it lands. And when it lands, everything changes. From the outside, it looks like nothing happened. From the inside, everything did. And if you are that person, you already know this feeling better than you can explain it. Because that is the problem. You cannot explain it, not in that moment. People have probably told you the same things your entire life. Why do you shut down? Why don't you just say what you feel? Why do you disappear when something matters? And after hearing that enough times, you start to question yourself. You start to wonder if you are too sensitive, too distant, too hard to understand. But what if none of that is true? What if the silence is not the problem? What if the silence is the response? And more importantly, what if it is not random? Because it is not. There is a reason your body does this. And it starts in a moment so small that most people miss it. You are in a conversation. Everything feels normal. You are listening, responding, thinking, and then something is said that does not sit right. It might not even be obvious. It might just be a tone, a word, a shift in energy. But your body notices it before your mind does. There is a tightening, a slight pressure in your chest. Your breathing changes just enough that you feel it but cannot describe it. Your thoughts start to move faster, but your ability to speak does not move with them. It slows down instead. And then something very specific happens. You stop reaching for words. Not because you do not have anything to say, but because what you are feeling has not formed into something clear yet. It is raw, unsorted, incomplete, and trying to speak it too early feels wrong. So you do what your system has learned to do. You go quiet. Now here is the part most people misunderstand. They think that silence is a decision. They think you are choosing not to speak. They think it is control, or distance, or avoidance. But in reality, it is none of those things. Because when emotional intensity crosses a certain threshold, your brain does not ask you what you want to do. It responds automatically. There is a system inside you designed to protect you when something feels overwhelming. Most people know two parts of it, fight and flight. But there is a third part that is just as real and just as powerful, freeze. And freeze does not look like panic. It does not look like fear in the way people expect. It looks like stillness. It looks like silence. It looks like someone who suddenly cannot find their words. Because on a neurological level, that is exactly what is happening. There is a region in your brain responsible for language, for taking what you feel and turning it into something you can say. And when your nervous system detects too much emotional pressure, that system becomes less active. Not completely off, but quieter. Which means in that exact moment when someone is asking you to explain what is wrong, your brain is making it harder to do exactly that. So when you stand there, quiet, unable to respond, that is not you being stubborn. That is your nervous system prioritizing stability over expression. You are not shutting people out. You are holding yourself together. And that distinction matters more than people realize. Because once you understand that, the silence stops looking like a flaw and starts looking like a function. But it does not end there. Because this pattern did not just appear randomly one day. You were not born this way. If you go back far enough, you were not quiet when you were hurt. You expressed everything. You cried. You reacted. You made your feelings visible without hesitation. Until something taught you not to. And it usually was not one moment. It was a pattern. Maybe it was subtle at first. You expressed something honestly and it got dismissed. You were told it was not a big deal, that you were overreacting, that you needed to calm down. Maybe it happened more directly. You opened up and someone minimized it, or ignored it, or responded in a way that made you feel worse for saying it out loud. Or maybe it was something deeper. You trusted someone with something real and later it was used against you, thrown back at you in a moment when you were already vulnerable. And your brain learned something very quickly. Being open is not always safe. So it adapted. Not by turning off your emotions, but by changing how you express them. Instead of reacting outwardly, you moved inward. Instead of speaking immediately, you started processing first. Instead of exposing everything in real time, you contained it. And that containment became your version of control. But what most people do not see is that inside that silence, there is nothing passive about what is happening. Your mind is active, very active. While everything looks still on the outside, internally you are doing something most people do not take the time to do. You are analyzing. You are replaying what happened. You are checking your own reaction. You are asking yourself if you misunderstood something. You are comparing it to past experiences. You are trying to figure out what you actually feel before you say anything about it. Because for you, speaking without clarity is risky. Not just because you might be wrong, but because once something is said, it cannot be taken back. And you have learned that the cost of saying the wrong thing in the wrong moment can be high. So you wait. Not because you do not care, but because you care enough to get it right. There is also another layer to this that is harder to admit, even to yourself. Part of your silence is protective, not just for you, but for the people around you. Because you know what is underneath that initial reaction. You know that if you spoke too early, what would come out would not be measured or clear. It would be raw, unfiltered, possibly unfair. And you do not want that. So you hold it? You let the intensity settle before you turn it into words. There is a concept in psychology called the window of tolerance. It refers to the range where you can feel emotions and still think clearly at the same time. Inside that window, communication works. Outside of it, it does not. When you are outside of that window, you are either overwhelmed or shut down. And in both states, nothing productive gets communicated. You understand this intuitively. That is why you go quiet. You are not avoiding the conversation. You are waiting until it can actually happen. But here is where things become difficult, because the world does not always understand that difference. People expect immediate responses. They expect clarity in real time. They expect you to match their pace, their style, their way of processing. And when you do not, they misinterpret it. They think you are distant, or uninterested, or withholding. So they push. They ask again. They demand answers. They try to pull you out of your silence before you are ready. And every time that happens, it reinforces the same message you have been carrying for a long time. That your way of processing is not acceptable. But what you actually need is the opposite of that. You need space without pressure. You need time without expectation. You need someone who can tolerate your silence without making it about themselves. Because when that happens, something changes. When you do not feel forced, you open up more naturally. When you do not feel judged, you speak more honestly. When you do not feel rushed, you find the right words instead of just any words. And when you finally do speak, it is different. Because you do not speak impulsively. You do not say things you do not mean. You do not use words as weapons. When you say something matters, it is because you have already tested it against your own understanding. You have checked it for accuracy, for fairness, for truth, and that level of emotional integrity is rare. Most people speak quickly and process later. You process first and speak when it is real. So when you look at this clearly, the pattern becomes obvious. You go quiet when you are hurt because your nervous system is protecting you. Because your past taught you that not every environment is safe for vulnerability. Because your mind processes emotions with depth instead of speed. And because part of you is always trying to protect the relationship from damage that could happen in a moment of unfiltered reaction. You are not cold. You are not distant. You are not broken. You are someone who feels deeply and refuses to reduce those feelings into something careless. And yes, that will be misunderstood. Because the world rewards speed. It rewards immediate reaction. It rewards visibility. Your way is slower, quieter, less obvious, but it is not less real. In fact, it is often more real. Because when you finally speak, you are not reacting anymore. You are concluding. And there is a difference between those two things that most people never learn. And maybe the goal is not to change that completely. Maybe the goal is not to force yourself to speak before you are ready. Maybe the goal is simply to understand what is happening inside you so that the silence does not feel confusing or wrong. Because once you understand it, you stop fighting it. And once you stop fighting it, you can start choosing when to stay in it and when to step out of it. And that is where things begin to shift. Not because you became someone else, but because you finally understood who you already were, and that changes everything.